I noticed on the show, you almost never recommend people. I don't even know if I've heard you ever do this, recommend that people break up or end their relationship. And I wonder, under what circumstances would you recommend that people just, how do we know if something is actually over?
Yeah. So actually there are more than one episodes where I tell people this is over. Or I said, you better be friends than partners, because as partners, you suck, So I do, here's the thing. I am often cautious on the podcast because it's one-time episodes. It's a one-time session. And I don't necessarily have that certainty in one time. In my practice, it's different. I've worked with you over time and I've seen where it goes. And I sometimes really have to say, look, your partner is gone. I don't know. I know you're fighting to maintain this, but they're gone. And you need to hear that. Or listen, people, there is nothing to work with. It's death upon arrival. Either each of you just comes here to basically say you've done a few sessions so that you can go to the lawyer and then screw the other person. No, I'm not participating in this. Or look, you asked your partner to do a bunch of things and they've done all of this. You've done squat. I don't think they deserve you. So I actually have said a lot of things that are all about this without having to say, I think you should leave. On occasion, but why don't I say it just flippantly? Because I don't have to live with the consequences. Only the person who makes that decision has to live with the consequences, and they have to own it. And I think a therapist can be very powerful, and I don't want to be the one to carry your decision. You need to carry it. So if you ask me, I ask, are you asking me what you should do? Or are you asking me because you've already made your decision? And if you made your decision, I'll support you.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people do go to therapy to get cover for something they've already decided to do or not to do. And that's a waste of your time, first of all, I would imagine.
I mean, basically, I know when I'm working towards something, and I know when people are basically posturing. You do get a sense of that. Or when one person has one foot out the door, or when one person is dropping off the other one because they're on their way out. There's a lot of, why are you here? What are you here to do? In the podcast, because it's one session, I do not feel that I can take that liberty. I'm not a therapist. I'm a podcast host that is doing therapeutic conversations. And at that point, only once or twice did I really say to people, yeah, this is.
So the people on the podcast, and to be clear, you really are a therapist, but what you're talking about when you're doing the podcast, you're a podcast host who's doing therapy. Those people have not had a bunch of sessions with you before?
They have never been my patients. No, there are 6,000 applicants to the new season who want to be on the podcast. They are not patients and they will never be patients. I keep these things two very separate.
That makes sense.
They don't apply with me. They apply with the producers. I show up. They have been chosen. And then we meet, and it is in my office, and it feels like it's a real situation. But that's it. I will see them once, and nobody else has ever seen them.
That's interesting. By the way, I was going to mention this off air, but whatever, here we are. I recognized my friend's voice in one of the episodes, and I was like, did you go on a podcast with Esther Perel? And he was like, send me the link, because I guess he hadn't heard it. And it was kind of funny because I'm just going off this person's voice cadence. And I was like, did you do this thing where you, and he's like, yes, I did. That was me. So that was kind of funny. Out of all the thousands of people applying to be on your show and all the selection of episodes that I heard, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's John. Here we are.
Was it helpful?
It wasn't super serious for him. I think it was more like, it was. But I think it was more like I don't think he was horrified. I mean, he's the one who applied to be on there. So it was just kind of a funny thing because he probably thought, no, at least no one's going to know who that is. I can air that dirty laundry.
Here you go.
Yeah. Put that on the Google form. Hey, people might hear this and recognize your voice. You never know.
The other people on the podcast, by the way, I call them spontaneously. They send us voice questions, and then I surprise them with a phone call all over the world.
Oh, wow.
and we do the sessions like that. So there's different formats now on where should we begin,
Yeah.
but all of them exploring dynamics of relationships.
You do some pretty interesting stuff on the show. I think I heard this. There was a particularly intense conflict, and you made people lay on the floor. What was that all about? That was interesting, changing their physiology like that.
Yes. Have you ever tried to have an argument lying flat?
Yeah, I can't
It's much
imagine.
harder.
It's probably
No, we are
quite
mammals. We are mammals. We
Mhm.
fight by charging. We stand upright, we lift our shoulders, we lower our neck, we protect ourselves, and then we attack or defend. That you can't do when you lie flat. So they began having a fight, the usual same old. And I said, let's try do this on the floor. And it indeed instantly changed the physiology, which then made them suddenly completely change affect. What the physicality led into the emotionality, and it's an extremely effective intervention. And it's something you can do at home very easily if you have a tiny bit of humor.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you recommend people, well, one, add humor, because it seems like a really good way to de-escalate things, as long as you don't use humor to avoid the actual issue, which is tempting sometimes. But also, I'm sure there's some science in there, like it chills the sympathetic nervous system or whatever, and is also quite silly trying to have a shouting match while you're staring at the ceiling fan.
I think that humor is underrated. It's such an important salve in relationships. And I do think sometimes it's meant to avoid. And why not? Sometimes you should avoid going into the same tunnel one more time. No, if you have one person in the relationship who can diffuse it and make everyone laugh, it's not sarcasm. It's not, but it's really saying, oh, seriously, we're going to do this again. That it is a gift to the relationship. Humor brings perspective. Humor brings lightness and levity. Humor takes you out of your goddamn seriousness of, and I can't value humor and playfulness enough. And when people talk about fighting better, they think it's about fighting better. It's actually about relating better. And humor in a relationship is such a recognition of the difference of the other too. It's a way of accepting who you're with.
I love the idea of being able to have healthy conflict. I know it's probably a buzzword in every sort of relationship circle, healthy conflict, but you just see these little cuts that people have in their relationship turn into these festering wounds over years and years if you can't do this right. And I know I'll link to your upcoming course that I think will be out by the time this episode comes out on conflict so that people can really dig into this, because there's going to be a lot more like the things we discussed in that course, I assume, yeah?
Yes, plenty. Only.
Okay.
Full,
Only.
chock
Good.
full.
Chock full. Good. That's what I like to see. I'd love to talk a little bit about how you grew up, because I know you grew up around Holocaust survivors. Was it true your parents were the only survivors from each of their families? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Both of them. One came from a family of 9. One came from a family of 7. They both lost everybody and spent each 4 and 5 years in concentration camps.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I grew up in trauma.
Trauma. Yeah. Were you a refugee family? I guess you have to be a refugee family.
Yes. My parents were refugees from Poland who came to Belgium. And then they were 5 years illegal refugees in Belgium. And only 5 years later did they become legalized. And then our first passport were UN stateless passports.
Oh, wow. Wow, I didn't even know they had those. I'd never heard of that. It makes perfect sense for a conflict like that. Are you Jewish, or were your parents just Polish that were pushed out of Poland because of the Nazis were horrible to everyone?
No, they were not gay, not Gypsy or Roma, and they were Jewish.
We're Jewish.
So those were the 3 main groups that were
I know that even
annihilated.
Even I guess this is not a history podcast, but I think even non-Jewish Poles were also put in camps, were they not? Yeah. So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Did y'all have the couches covered in plastic? That's what the immigrant families back in Michigan, where I grew up, always had. Plastic on everything. Couch from 1965 looks like it's new, except for it has a butt print in it that goes all the way down to the wood.
Beautifully descriptive. So this is very interesting, this couch metaphor, because I've often used it to describe what I saw was a distinction in the community of Holocaust survivors that I grew up in. And it was, but it's a distinction that I've used for all couples. Among survivors, there were those who did not die and those who came back to life. That's what I see in relationships too. Relationships that are not dead, but they're just surviving, and relationships that are living and thriving. It's the same metaphor. And the ones that survived, that didn't die, were the ones who had covered couches and lowered shades. And the world was a dangerous place, and you didn't really take many chances, and you avoided risk, and you didn't trust anybody. And the ones on the other end of this were often what I call the people who understood the erotic as an antidote to death. They understood vibrancy and aliveness and vitality, as a way to just embrace life. They didn't survive for nothing. And those people didn't have any plastic on their couches.
Yeah, there is quite the metaphor in the plastic on the couch. Now that you bring that in, yeah, the plastic on the couch, it never really made a ton of sense to me, right? It's like you got to use the thing and really enjoy it. But you're right, the plastic on the couch is we've got to protect this thing, and then it eventually. It's no longer, you don't end up with a new couch that you take the plastic off of. You end up with an old couch that's still worn and used in a different way that you just didn't fully enjoy because it had that stupid plastic thing on it that when you laid down just made you feel sweaty and icky.
Right. But the key word is the enjoy. When you are in survival mode, when you are vigilant, when you see danger everywhere, when you don't take off the plastic, you don't allow for joy and pleasure. That's the piece. It's like, because when you are experiencing joy or enjoyment or pleasure, you're not vigilant. You can't be anxious and experience pleasure at the same time. Whereas when you are in the side that embraces the danger of life as a fact of life, but you are in the erotic experience of it, you're going to live life at its fullest, then you experience pleasure. You can't be watchful and experience pleasure at the same time. And so that's the essence of the word when you say the couch is an old couch that we never got to enjoy. The lack of enjoyment is the key word here.
It sounds like you had a lot of cultures blending together around you. It explains probably why you speak 9 languages. And it sounds like a lot of different foods from day to day, languages from day to day, types of people in the house from one day to the next. And I would guess you became pretty adept at not only flipping languages, but flipping cultures or perceptions or the lens that you look at through the world, right? Because if you're speaking German, you have that German lens on the world. And then if you speak French the next day or the next hour, it's probably a very different lens on that conversation or that social interaction or just on everything that's around you in that moment.
I love when I tour in Europe to be giving a talk in Flemish or Dutch, and then a talk in German, and then a talk in Spanish, and then a talk in French, and then a talk in Hebrew, all within 3 weeks. I love it. I think it's like different parts of me wake up. The conversation is different. It's traveling at multiple levels. It's not just traveling other countries. So yes, languages are very important to me. I work in 7 of them, and it is a gate to the world. And I am a traveler by nature in the way I not just because I travel, but because I like to enter very different worlds of my own.
Were you conscious about learning all those languages? Was it kind of like, I want to know what everyone is saying? Or was it just exposure to all these languages over time and you learned them through osmosis?
So we spoke 5 at home.
Wow.
My father was illiterate, by the way. He could not write, and he kind of taught himself to read newspapers. But it's not that there was education. I'm the first who went to college. But Flemish and French are the 2 main languages in Belgium. My parents spoke Polish, Yiddish, and German with each other. So those were floating around. I am schooled in Flemish. I know I have a French accent, but I'm actually from the Flemish part of Belgium, schooled in Flemish. Then I traveled to Italy. Then I got involved with South American music. Then I was in a Brazilian band. Stuff like that. You learn in school, you learn traveling, you learn on the pillow, and you learn at home.
On the pillow. That's funny. That is, yeah. Well, that's a different conversation, I suppose. That's so fascinating. Did you ever ask your parents why they survived when other people in their family didn't? Did that sort of define? I know a lot of survivors, they have guilt around that, or they have a story around that.
Look, I was very, very blessed that I had parents who they didn't have survivor guilt. They wanted to live. They fought tooth and nail to stay alive. Like most survivors, they will tell you that the first reason they were alive is because of luck. Just they didn't get round up, they didn't called into the triage of the day or things like that, or that day didn't freeze minus 20, so that they kept their feet and stuff like that, and they could continue work. But after that, I think both of them were always hoping that they would be reunited with family at some point, that somebody was waiting for them somewhere. And they know my whole family of my mother's side went to Auschwitz. My father's family went to Treblinka. And so that was very, very clear to them. But I think they were the youngest in their families. My father always said that he grew up in a tiny village with a horse and a carriage, and it was freezing weather, and he had concrete bags on his back. And he said, we were more prepared than the Jews from Paris and from Greece. We were used to the cold and to the hard life. And we had a wish to live. We were fighting to stay human and to stay alive.
Does growing up in an environment like that contribute to maybe a sense of impermanence or instability at all? I mean, refugees, different cultures, or because I guess that could go either way, right? It could be like, wow, look at this mix of everything and we're at the center of it. What a blessing. Or it could be, wow, I don't know who I am or where we're from or anything. It's just all a big jumble.
No, we were very, very rooted. I mean, my mom's statement was always, never forget who you are. Because then you know why you're trying, who you want to be and why you're fighting for, etc. But no, I think it's different. That for me personally, I would say the awareness that at any moment everything can disappear is something that I live very, very intensely. It's a constant sense of awareness and sometimes dread. That comes from their story. You wake up one day and your whole life is gone. Mm-hmm. That is very present for me. At the same time, I live as if it's not going to happen. I take risks. I do things. So it's a combination of two things. You know that there is danger, but you live as if you're fearless.
That's very Jewish, I think, in many ways, or at least Jewish as it seems from my family's culture and the other Jews that I know. It's very the whole something bad might happen at any time is very much is that trauma or is that just Judaism?
That's collective
I don't even
trauma.
know. Yeah,
no, it's totally. You live in Canada, right?
No, I live in San Jose, California.
Why did I think you? Okay,
because I'm very friendly and nice and apologize all the time. That's probably why.
No, I don't think it's necessarily Jewish, or I would put it this way: it's Jewish because it's historically so, because it is part of the collective consciousness of Jews. This is the history. It has repeated itself all along. So that awareness of the impermanence of things, we don't have buildings, we have books for that very reason. No cathedrals. There's books, the stuff you can carry with you because you're about to be in exile once again. So, and the Jews are not the only people in exile. There's plenty of other people in exile too. But if you ask specifically about me, yes, that notion of impermanence, of the world is at any moment can switch in front of you. Don't take anything for granted. Is very present, and in a good way too. That allows you to thank people so that you don't have to think later, oof, I wish I had thanked them more.
Yeah, that is quite fascinating. That sense of impermanence. Did the wide exposure you got as a child lead to this deep understanding of human nature and empathy of the kind that you seem to bring into your therapy sessions in the show? Or is that something you developed professionally later on?
No, I think I grew up with it. I had a father specifically who, while he was illiterate, was an extreme humanist. He, he saved 60 kids on his own. He did a lot of good things for people, and he was probably one of the least judgmental people. And he really taught me not to be quick to judge, and not to just jump on the high horse, and not to accuse without knowing. And he, in a gentle way, he didn't make a speech about it. I just saw it, He always had a way of saying, well, you don't know. You don't know what may have happened to them before, or you don't know what happened in the morning, or just chill, don't judge. And I think having been judged and having been so discriminated and so persecuted, you can come out both sides. You can come out the person who persecutes others and identifies with the aggressor and does to the others what was done to you, or you can come out with a level of kindness toward people that was really, he was adored for those things. And I really picked that up. I think one of the things people will often say about the work is it's firm, it's direct, but it's not judgmental.
How did he save the kids?
He created a black market in the camp, and he had a trafficking of potatoes.
Potato trafficker.
Yes.
My goodness. That's not something you hear every day.
No, he didn't get much else to eat there either,
Yeah.
So he created a whole black market and was able to feed people. One potato more meant another day of life. It's very, I actually, somebody else told me this whole story. He barely kind of, he didn't make a big deal out of it. Somebody else said to me, I'm one of those 60 kids.
Wow. That must have been quite a moment when you found out that your dad saved not only one person, but 60 people in a camp where he was fighting for his own life and could easily have justified just not caring about anybody else.
Yeah. But, it's attached to a story. Because when I went to the camps with him one day, he described how he fell in love with this woman in the camp. And he had decided, I'm going to help her. She had arrived late, she was it was 44. But then he got caught sending her notes. Now, it never occurred to me to ask him who wrote for you, because you can't write. What language did you communicate with this woman? How did that happen? But anyway, I took the story, and he got caught. And then they took him out of the kitchens and back to the factories. And he said, I would have survived 10 days. You didn't last there. But the SS came to him, the German, and said, I eat better when you're in the kitchen. And he put him back in the kitchens. So he didn't just save the kids. Wow. He also fed the...
Gosh, good thing he knew how to cook well. It
literally
saved
cooking.
his life.
My father didn't know to make an egg. No, he just smuggled potatoes.
Oh, I see. They ate more / better. Wow. So even the SS was starving at this point, I guess, in the war.
Exactly. And my father's best friend was the cook. So he cooked the friggin' potatoes.
Jeez. Wow. That's really something. I mean, gosh, it just shows you how traumatic and how hard life was even at that point, where the people who were running the camps were like, hey, we need the extra potato every day. That is so awful.